George Galloway won this Rockdale by-election in a landslide, in part because of his position on Gaza, which most Britons support, which is for the IDF to stop dropping 2,000-pound bombs indiscriminately on women and children. Now, our government's support for the IDF's bombing of children, as well as mainstream media supporting that, we're not going to hear about George Galloway on mainstream media. And the argument could be made, why would Australian media cover just a by-election over in Britain? Well, the difference with George is that he is highlighting a seismic shift in politics in the UK. Now, there was one media outlet that did cover George's success. Now, the role Sky News has been given in the Australian media landscape is a news destination for sensible conservative Australians. At times, it will actually cover a story with facts and fairly, but that will be on topics of low importance that have limited, if any, material outcomes, unlike the George Galloway story. Now, in this article, they run a hit piece on George and they bring in one of their heavy hitters, Nigel Farage. Now, they start out by not using George Galloway's name in print in the article. And I think the reason they do that is that anything that's printed in an article might be found in a search. And while they're putting this story up, they don't actually want people to see it, in particular by searches of people that haven't already corralled into this supposed conservative safe space. Now, there's two reasons they're running this story they don't really want people to see. And one is that their regular viewers will be wondering why it's not on Sky News. George's win was big news here. Why aren't they covering it? So this is their way of covering it, but not really. And the second more sinister reason they run these stories is to claim implied consent from the people for the government's actions. In this case, it's weapons exports to Israel that implicate Australian government and vicariously us through implied consent in mass killings in Gaza. And that there is a legal application to find out what weapons have been sent means they're keeping it hidden. Now, the second way people in Gaza are being killed is by Israel blocking aid, causing disease and starvation, of which Australia is also committed by ceasing this funding. And what George's win in the by-election confirms is that Western governments do not have the implied consent of the people. That 100% of people want a ceasefire, but it's not happening because governments are in bed with Israel and everyone behind them, and the media that run this story, what I'm about to show you from Nigel Farage, head host of Sky News, that they claim, no, we do have your implied consent.
Now, let's talk about a bloke called George Galloway.
A bloke meaning not too important, even though he's been in politics for decades and once gave a stirring talk in the Congress of the United States.
For those that are watching right now, he was formerly of the Labor Party. He's sort of been in and out of their side of politics. He's got more left-wing as he's gone.
Well, that's all correct. Labor, left-wing, that's meant to get the Conservatives watching this offside.
He's had a pretty strong online presence for a while. He decided to run in a by-election. He's in, and the first words out of his mouth were, "This is for Gaza."
Spoken in a tone that if you're in politics, you're not meant to be for Gaza.
Yes, this is for Gaza. He appeared in the House of Commons. He was sworn in. I've been warning ever since the 7th of October that if we weren't careful, religious sectarian politics would come to England.
Religious sectarian politics, that particular phrase now has been captured. It's a catch cry, something to be scared of, which means you're meant to be scared of George Galloway.
We saw it for decades in Northern Ireland with that Protestant-Catholic split.
Entirely inappropriate comparison, given that Northern Ireland was about a struggle for political independence, where for quite some time some terrorist activity was going on, whereas this is a defence force, Israeli defence force, dropping 2,000-pound bombs right on top of churches, schools, homes where they know women and children are.
Now it's coming to England. So Galloway gets elected on a Muslim vote.
Now, Nigel's gone out on a limb here because that was an out-and-out lie that it can be called out from by evidence, because the Islamic population in Rochdale is less than 20%. And this was recorded as a landslide win, which less than 20% of the population cannot deliver.
Being no doubt about it, it was Muslims that voted Galloway.
Well, he's really doubling down here, but why wouldn't they be voting for Galloway if he's for the side of Gaza? Because mainly Muslims being killed. But he's hiding the fact that it was actually the votes from the other religions and the atheists that got George across the line.
Overwhelmingly. He appears in the House of Commons. Everyone's in denial. No, Nigel, you're wrong. This is not sectarian politics. And then Galloway stands outside the historic St Stephen's entrance to the Palace of Westminster and says the next election will be all about Muslims.
Well, at the start they said that he mentioned Gaza straight off the bat, But now they're saying, or Nigel was saying that he actually mentioned Muslims. Well, he may have, but that's just the fact that the majority in Gaza are Muslims.
And some of the things that his supporters, even his deputy leader said the night of the Galloway victory, there are more kids being killed in Gaza than died in Auschwitz.
Well, if Nigel's saying it here, perhaps the deputy leader did say that. Now, if that statement was factually incorrect, then surely Nigel would call that out.
I mean, it's one of the most disgusting comments I've ever heard on British television.
In an impassioned voice, he says, it's disgusting. But he doesn't actually refute it. Isn't that interesting?
And it was live on GB News. We couldn't stop the transmission.
Is Farage talking censorship? Isn't he meant to be on the other side of the fence?
This is a vehemently Israel-hating, anti-Semitic movement.
Oh, the go-to position to shut everybody down. And see how he said he was shaking his head and getting very melodramatic.
And Galloway, what he will do is he'll peel votes away from the Labour Party. The Labour Party had the Muslim vote.
See, the difference there is when a mainstream political party has the Muslim vote as a bloc, well, that's okay. But if the Muslims decide to vote for someone they disagree with, well, then it's religious sectarian politics.
As a bloc vote, they're about to lose it. And the implications for our democracy are very, very serious indeed.
Now, if the two cheeks of the same arse, as George Galloway has eloquently put it, aren't in power, well, then democracy is in danger.
Which is the media regulator is trying to go after you. Right? Is it those rules about political figures and whether they can or can't be on television? Sorry, are you running? Did you announce at some point in time? But why is the media regulator trying to knock you off?
Well, this should be interesting for Nigel, given he wanted George knocked off GB News.
I've just done my 550th episode of Farage on GB News. I've done 550 shows for 2.5 years. Do you know, I've not had one single complaint upheld against me.
Oh, geez, it's tough watching these theatrical puppets, isn't it? Look at Farage. Got his script on the teleprompter there, same as his Sky News clown. But the conclusion is that they're running this story to claim that the majority of people are with their governments in dropping £2,000 bombs on churches, schools, what I've already mentioned, women and children. But of course, the by-election, even though it's only a by-election in England, it's representative of the mood of the people there and everyone across the world. So they're trying to snuff this thing out as quickly as possible. Is anyone else starting to think that perhaps that debanking of Nigel Farage was merely an organised stunt that he was a part of to try and make out like he's not with the banks, when in actual fact he most likely is? All right, that's it for this one.